first event of many, in which we discuss kind of how we can all take advantage of all these great opportunities to evolve, and how we can just to discuss the most important topics that face us. Yeah, the timing's obviously not fantastic, but it's great to see so many people here. So thank you all for coming, even if it makes you get up this early in the morning, which you probably haven't done in quite a long time. we have our amazing panel here, and we will be accepting questions at the end. So feel free to use your brand new notebooks and lovely TutorCruncher branded pens. Yeah, now onto the panel, chaired by Ben Caulfield. He's the founder and CEO of Edie, which if you haven't heard of it or used it before, is a really amazing, cool new tool to help children learn maths. He'll probably explain it far better than I will. But we had a demo with him this week, and it really is a cool tool. Our team member, also called Ben, said it was one of the most smartest things he's seen. He's been demoing kind of a lot of this kind of thing lately. So yeah, check it out if you haven't already. Enjoy it, have fun, and over to you, Ben.
Thanks very much, Tom. Morning, everybody. I'm not here to tell you more about my business. I'm here to talk about these individuals, and they're going to do the hard work. I just pose a few questions. But briefly, as Tom said, Ben Caulfield, I've been in this space for 6 years. I started off with Maths Doctor, so back 6 years ago, which was spun out of Macmillan Education. And so I know this space well, but I decided to look more at the sort of technology and assessment angle. So we've been working with about 18,000 schools around the world with diagnostic assessment, built a huge data set, and now we're monetizing that data set with a B2C opportunity, but also, as Tom reflected there, B2B. So helping tutor businesses in particular solve that cold start problem. What does a child know, and what should they learn next? So if that's of interest, feel free to drop me an email and I can tell you a little bit more about it. But this is why we're here today. Some great individuals who've got various experience in tuition, from sort of tutoring university, from the charitable side of things, to being some of the big players in the market. So I'm going to do my very sort of best to be sort of Cilla Black and go around and do some introductions very shortly. But we're all here. We all understand the tuition space. So it's been around since the Greeks in particular. I was fortunate enough to go to a grammar school. I had a bit of tuition myself. Newton went to my school. I tried to do some graffiti on the walls in the same way his signature is. I got suspended and sent home for the day. I could be just as famous as him in 300 years' time. Who knows? I think Newton's a really interesting one. He was terrible at mathematics at the school, but he went to Cambridge, and it was this one-to-one relationship that he had with a tutor whilst he was there that allowed him to become, this incredible scientist that everybody knows today. And it's kind of interesting because it kind of moves through to, I guess I'd say more recent times, but Victorian times, where we've sort of seen this divergence of tuition and teaching. Teaching is this kind of objective where you're teaching 30 individuals in a class. Tuition is that much more individualized approach. All the research says that tuition is the most powerful way to teach individuals something. Yet we still sort of stick with this kind of mainstream solution. The pandemic has thrown all this into sort of disarray. The tuition markets and the sort of state education market have merged, and we'll touch a little bit more on that today. So without further ado, I will start with Julia at the end. So if you want to give a bit of introduction, what you're up to, and then I think I asked the question how many tutors are perhaps you working with, or students, whichever is more relevant.
Hello. I'm Julia Silva. I run Qualified Tutor. I launched Qualified Tutor 2 years ago with 3 hats on: school leader, mother, and insecure tutor. And the reason why I say it like that is also the reason that I'm writing my book at the moment. Tutoring is not plan B. It's a legitimate profession, and for some a better career choice. And it's also why we launched the Love Tutoring Festival. As an opportunity to bring people together, we created World Tutors Day, the 2nd of July as well. Our message around love tutoring is a broad message that invites those of us who are inspired by the change that we can make when we're working one-to-one or in small groups. And it's an antidote to the fact that tutoring has been hidden from mainstream education. But really the roots of Qualified Tutor are training, raising standards by developing the adults who work with the children and students. It is an international vision because tutoring is an international profession. And I think that it's important that, again, with my 3 hats on, a school leader who knows that quality assurance is based on a rigorous recruitment and retention process. A mother who's looking for transparency when employing a tutor, and a tutor who knows that it's lonely, it's difficult to know if you're doing it right. And all I need is to know that the other tutors around me are colleagues and not competitors. One of the problems with tutoring as a tutor is there's no sense of progression through professionalism. And that's something that we're very much leaning in on. So the new thing that we've just launched this week in Qualified Tutor is digital credentials. And that's going to enable tutoring platforms to have a field on their profiles, on the tutors' profiles, that will say, are you a qualified tutor? And they'll drop in the URL for their digital wallet, and that will show all their badges and certificates and their commitment to ongoing professional development. We're doing a lot of work with the Chartered College of Teaching at the moment, and with all you colleagues here who I have a great time talking to, all in mind of serving the people who are serving the students. So that's what it's all about for me. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Hi everyone, very good to see everyone in 3D again. I'm Richard, professional tutor of 10 years now, I think, getting old, and founded the Profs about 8 years ago. I was also involved with the setup of online tutoring with BitPaper, which my brother created, which turned out to be quite a good idea, particularly circa March 2020. Most relevant here and little known is we actually have these really exciting widening participation schemes where we support many students to get into the top universities through one-to-one tutoring with fantastic results, which I think some of which you'll be the first to share today. So looking forward to learning from everyone else on the panel.
James?
I'm James. I'm co-founder of MyTutor. We exist basically to stop tutoring being just this unfair advantage that's only accessible to those with families who can afford tutoring. And so we've built 2 models from the ground up from day one. One, a kind of consumer marketplace where parents can access near-peer tutors who offer something a bit different to teachers in the classroom. And we've always delivered those sessions online. We've never delivered an in-person session, which was, I guess, a handy set of experiences and kind of learnings in the lead up to the pandemic. And then we also have a kind of school side to our business where we partner with state-funded secondary schools. And we currently partner with about 1,100 of them, so about a third of state secondaries. We have a tutor base of about 20,000 tutors, delivered 2.5 million lessons, and we recently have just made our first acquisition, which is a business that is in the co-curricular space. So a company called FireTech, who have a near-peer tutoring model helping kids learn coding and digital skills. So that's us, and I'm sure we'll talk a lot more.
Hello, I'm Jacob. In March 2020, when I was in my second year at university, I set up the Coronavirus Tutoring Initiative, which was a student-led, student-powered organisation offering completely free online tutoring to state school students. We ended up delivering about 50,000 hours of tutoring within 16 months. And since then, I have started working on helping to set up a new charity called Tutor the Nation, which takes on the learnings of the Coronavirus Tutoring Initiative and makes them a long-term offering. And since graduating in June, I've started working on Tutor the Nation full-time since July. And we're now working with about 25 schools, helping about 300 pupils so far.
Hi, I'm Andrew Ground, and I'm the founder of TutorFair. And we've done 3 things really to try and improve access to tutoring. The first one was to set up a marketplace for all tutors, offline and online, where customers could find and book them online. And our thinking there really was that doing it self-service would allow professional intermediation at a lower level than the agencies could provide. And that's been successful and survived. And we associated with the marketplace, we from the beginning thought that tutoring needed to be able to provide education for people who wouldn't afford it for themselves, and that if tutoring is to sit at the table of educate alongside the other streams of education and professions, then it needs to have a way in which it can get out to everybody. So we set up a charity and took a donation out of each of the lessons, which we've used to work with schools and to provide tutoring to people who wouldn't otherwise afford it. I have to say, Jacob, we were blown away by your numbers, but we have over 8 years with probably a little bit more kind of the sort of professionalism that you're being forced into now from schools. We have done 10,000 students over 8 years, but nothing like the firebolts that you created at the beginning of the pandemic. And we really looked at that. We were really super impressed. So we've been doing it for a long time. We're working with schools and other charities. And the third thing that I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to, because I think it might be an interesting theme in the thing, is during the pandemic we've been working on letting people share their tutor and having classes. And our thinking there really is that this is also part of by sharing you can afford more, basically, and so we will be able to bring down the cost per pupil in a small group massively over time, and so we think that that's going to be part of making tutoring truly available to everyone.
Which actually touched on my first question, so Andrew's taken my thunder there. So my first question actually was to all of you, but perhaps we can start with Jacob and then come back to Andrew if you've got more to add, which is how can we make tuition more accessible? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a few challenges, and I think in setting up the coronavirus tutoring initiative, my thought was just, we just need to get a tutor in front of a pupil. Seems very simple, you just find tutors and put them in front of a pupil. The key issue there, it seems easiest to do that online because you can reach a lot more young people all across the country, not just those who are, near a tutor. One of the huge problems I think at the moment is access to tech. Pupils having the ability to actually access online lessons if it is going to be delivered online. There's a massive issue in that if you're only delivering online tutoring, you're often only helping kind of the most advantaged of disadvantaged young people. So actually, I think, whatever we do moving forward to make tutoring more accessible, personally, perhaps unsurprisingly, I think online is the way forward. But I think coupled with that, we need to really understand the digital divide and what we can do more to ensure that young people are able to access that digital support.
It's the $1 million question, and I think one of the benefits of running both the kind of consumer marketplace and working directly with schools is that you realize that the two businesses are almost unrecognizable, and it's quite deceiving because actually when you're on the consumer side, often a fantastic tutor relationship and a really engaged student, or a student willing to kind of put effort into it with some nice technology, is enough. On the B2B side, it's basically an operational juggernaut because you're having to map different stakeholders, the school, the teachers, the decision maker, the parent, the student, the tutor. And you have to build all these kind of automated processes around it if you want to deliver at any sort of scale. So every initiative or strategy we have is around how do we build more scalable tutoring at a higher quality. And there are trade-offs. There are always trade-offs. So, it obviously a teacher with or a professional tutor with 20 years experience and hundreds of kids in their portfolio is going to be a fantastic option for a child. But are there enough of them to really make the impact globally at scale? And so that's where our near-peer model came in. It's not because we think near-peer tutors are the best and better than anyone else, but they're scalable. And if we can provide the right training, the right support, the right quality assurance, the right engaging tools to help them teach better, that is a great starting point, but not enough. All of the kind of automation that we build is around empowering teachers to provide the right information on students, keep track of the programs, marry the work we do with the classroom. So there's just so much complexity to scaling, and it goes far beyond the quality of a tutor or the quality of the tech.
Rich?
It's multifaceted. There are many bits of it. I think the one bit I introduced on very well on is finding a tutor. There are very many, Tutor Association, over 800 now, organizations that help to find tutors. So you can find a tutor, But then, can you afford it? Most obviously price. Many companies, initiatives trying to challenge that either with low cost for direct access or charities. However, there's a lot more that we can do there. And I'm delighted by the concept of the government investing $1 billion into tutoring. We need a lot more of those initiatives. We need a lot more funding and access to go to the charitable wings of the fantastic organizations sitting around me. I totally agree with James's point. Quality, there is currently a shortage of tutors in the UK. There is more demand than supply, and very important, we have initiatives, Judith's smiling, to help with that.
He's always smiling.
Online access, of course. The number of students who didn't have a family computer was 600 at the start of the pandemic. It was actually a bit lower than I thought, and the government has given 500,000 computers away, and now it's only 300,000. I don't know how that works. Ask the government. However, internet access for any of us who have decided to leave London and go and work in the countryside quickly came back, realizing that having internet is different from having good enough internet to be able to work with a child who may not even want to be there in the first place. But for all of those, I think it is still the stigma of tutoring that is the biggest access, that when you provide tutoring to many families, they are foolishly saying, but I'm not stupid. And I think it's the work of all of us in this room and in the industry to correct that stigma and show that tutoring is education and we shouldn't education shame. And I'm delighted, of course, when the government comes out and when the TTA very successfully got the head of Department of Education to come across, we're starting to challenge this in a new way, and these events are very good too. But I think the stigma is still the biggest thing that holds students back from getting more one-to-one help.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
What sort of demographic do you think the stigma is most prominent in?
I think the stigma is a great question, is most prominent in lower economic families. I think that I suspect that the stigma comes about from those who see tutoring as a bit of a luxury good, couldn't afford it. And so I'm aware, anecdotally, of many parents say, oh, you're not stupid. And really that's potentially they're not going to invest in the tutoring. However, as we've seen, 21% of all students are getting private tutoring, 41% in London, 75% at private schools. So I think there's a big informational barrier there that those haves who can afford it are not seeing the stigma, and it is rare to find someone who went to private school who hasn't had one-to-one tutoring at some point. So I believe the stigma, unfortunately, is sustaining people in the lower economic sector from getting it. And it's really important that we come out and say things like, I've had a tutor, and be role models, be brave about that, to show that no, successful people, most of your role models in life probably have at one point have one-to-one education. Would you agree? If I can counter
I
the question.
think the stigma is something which has really deep roots in the education system as well. There's a whole load of people who find it that it's in their economic interest to promote the stigma. So teachers want to say, oh, you don't need you don't need a tutor because you get everything you need at school. It's like we are everything. And so they have to slag off the tutor because otherwise it's doing themselves down. And then parents want to say they don't have it because my kid's so smart, he didn't need it. And so they deny the sort of implicit competition to be the kid who got the exam results without doing the homework. And we sort of all aspire to that from, I don't know, somewhere. And so we all sort of play along to that cultural stereotype. So the parents all have to deny it. And then finally, and the tutors themselves quite often deny, oh yes, well, I'm really trying to write my book. And they don't hold themselves up high, Julia, and say, yes, I'm a qualified tutor and do this. And so everyone has this kind of nexus of why they want to deny being part of the industry. And that's one of my big motivations for setting up Tutor Fair, was to try and create a thing which broke out some of those patterns.
Yeah, the first 7 years of me being a professional tutor, as I described, great, but what do you want to be in life? Thanks, Mum. And the rest of society. I think you're right. We do need to be proud of being tutors, and my call to action everywhere is always just get on social media. I don't care if you have one friend on LinkedIn or Facebook. When your student gets a good result, write anonymously about the student. Obviously, don't give their details. I'm so proud that this student got from whatever it is, a level 5 to a level 6, and I've really enjoyed seeing them grow. We've got to, as tutors, be proud of what we do and combat that stigma.
Yeah. I just want to, so just briefly back to the accessibility thing. So something James touched on there, Julia, was the I mean, the sort of lack of quality tutors, actually, most tuition businesses like to say and talk about their recruitment process, that actually only 1% of those who apply are the tutors that are used. I think we did that at Maths Doctor, but there is a you know, there's a lot of you know, James and I think Rich as well. You've kind of tapped into that university side of things actually, and Jacob with yours as well. But I wonder is like, how do we expand you know, that grouping of tutors and make sure that they are quality?
Great question, thank you. I've been fortunate to work with Manning's tutors for the last year and a half, and it's been wonderful training them. We're very close. I work very closely with the tutors and get to know them very well and get to know what they do and don't know and what assumptions you would make about what they need to know and how they show up with their students. And it is fascinating and complex and nuanced in the way that we've discussed. And I think to answer your question, I actually wanted to point you towards barriers for entry. I think that barriers for entry is a key element over here. Working with a professional tutor has a high barrier for entry, and working with a near peer has a lower barrier for entry. Our goal is to make sure that at whichever rung you're starting, there is a level of understanding of what the whole child is and what my role is as a trusted educator, a trusted adult in their life, and the relationship that entails in order to be trustworthy, in order to create learning. So whether you are a PhD tutor or whether you are tutoring GCSEs because you're doing your A-levels, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you know how to show up and be a lead learner and help them to take their next steps, you'll make the difference that's needed for right now. I think one of the things that we need to understand, I'm sort of giving away the whole book, is it's finding a tutor is like shoe shopping. You need the right pair of shoes for this purpose, for this person at this moment. There is no one perfect tutor. It's much more about the alignment between what the student needs right now and what the tutor can give them. And therefore, it doesn't need to be the most experienced tutor. And sometimes it really does need to be the most experienced tutor. And it's worth spending more money per hour because it will take you fewer hours. There was one more element that I wanted to add to that that's completely escaped me. So I'll let you know if it comes back.
Just sort of going back to one of James's points there, it was actually something I was going to touch on later and stuff, but it seems pertinent now, is, you know, from personal experience with the work that we do at ED, but it sounds like we're all sort of surfacing the same issue, is when you look at markets like China and India, and actually even within the UK market with regards to similar-minded parents, so from Asian backgrounds generally, Indian backgrounds, they understand the importance and the benefit of tuition. But if you look at that sector, generally speaking, Western societies, 20 to 30% will have private tuition, and you could probably say there's 20 to 30% at the bottom of the market that would just never be able to afford it. So they're reliant on things like you know, Jacob's efforts and similar sort of initiatives, the public purse. But it still means there's 50% of the market that are either underserved or not understanding the benefit of tuition. And you know, I wonder what can be done to try and improve that, to try and get that message across. And I think what's interesting for me is it apathy? Is it a lack of intent? Actually, exams, whether it's entrance exams or GCSE, push people to think more about a goal, whereas, you know, perhaps in the UK, we have this almost socialist sort of concept with education where you've got the sort of unions on one side with the teaching, but then you've also got the parents believing the state should provide. So that we never look externally for assistance. And, you know, sort of, I'm just wondering, maybe starting about this again, Andrew, what your thoughts are on that?
I think there's a little bit of socialism. The state ought to provide, so I don't have to. I think people get over that pretty quick when it comes to their own thing. Around us, the West London Free School was like hugely controversial amongst all the socialists, but the parents were queuing up to go there. So it's like, I think there's a lot of double talk on that sort of stuff. Oh yes, yeah. And I mean, just look at all the lefties. They all go to selective schools and all the rest of it. It's like absolute. So I think that is largely humbug. Second thing is, though, that the history of us was, you wanted your kid to be the captain of the football team more than you wanted him to be the Olympiad maths medal winner. And that's just not the case. My wife comes from India, and she had a tutor, right from the beginning. And it's all they, and her cousins, a bewildering number of them have further degrees, far more than me with 2-degree educated parents. And so it's just it's a culture thing. It's they value that education and the thing, and that's been how you've competed. Which is, of course, remember we took exams from the Chinese when we were very impressed when we had to go and kowtow to them. And they actually select people for government contracts based on exams, not based on who bid the highest, which is how we previously basically ran our government. And so we're just still catching up with the Chinese 200 years ago.
Yeah, I think it might be apathy. I think it might be a belief on behalf of parents that tutors aren't for their child because, like we've already said, their child isn't stupid. I think actually one of the big problems as well is just lack of awareness. We work with a lot of young people who have never had a tutor, and none of their peers have ever had a tutor, and their parent never had a tutor, and none of their parents' peers have ever had a tutor. So actually it's about just talking about what tutoring is on a basic level. And I hope that the National Tutoring Programme and schemes like that, which are bringing tutoring to a bigger audience, are going to help, far beyond the actual impact they have on individual young people by just bringing the concept of tutoring to a wider audience. And then it's up to us as an industry to go forward and say, okay, brilliant, you know what tutoring is, and here we are ready to provide it in a way that's accessible to you. So I think it's awareness.
That's so brilliant. I wish I'd said that. Yes. I meant to say that. The NTP is such a great opportunity for us all. We must all try and contribute some positive PR to it. Even, I have failed twice, and I know there's lots of people on here who got on it, but let's bring it into the mainstream. And salute John for getting the Secretary of State to come to the TTA conference. Salute the guys who are doing it. We'd like to come join you. But this is a great opportunity for the industry, and we need to make sure that it's not surrounded by completely poisonous thing. And I think there is something political in that, by the way. Why does it? I mean, how can you give away £1 billion and end up with just relentless negativity in the press? Anyway, you let us know, guys, what we can do to help you. But we should all think that that's a really big and important thing for us to do, is to get into the mainstream and be at the table now.
Unfortunately, I do think that's a problem of the education in this country. I don't know whether any of you guys gone to Edu Twitter. It is a horribly negative space. But we'll touch on that. James?
I think you're dealing with different problems for different stakeholders. So I think the conversation so far, I agree, has focused on the students. But then to make a kind of a real national program or an opportunity for all students, the teachers are huge stakeholders, the parents are huge stakeholders. So what I see with teachers is actually in the state system quite a strong willingness to use tutoring. I think for years they'd used their own teachers, paid extra, used it as an opportunity to almost pay their own staff extra money. And obviously that's not scalable. Teachers are bogged down in admin, rising class sizes, and they don't want to do it. And so the next option was what do we do? Do we partner with a local university? Do we get a private agency? And I think the challenge that they've always found is the amount of admin that it takes to run a program is just overwhelming. Making sure students attend, especially if they see it as a punishment rather than an opportunity, is impossible. Making sure that the impact is evaluated properly and they can make a business case for it the following year. All these things are really, really complex to solve. And I don't think that we truly widen access without the school's kind of engagement, involvement, buy-in. So that's one stakeholder that doesn't get talked about as much. So I don't think it's apathy on the school side. I think it's overwhelm. It's not enough time to really find the right solutions and to implement them properly. So take the NTP. There's loads of teething issues with the NTP. It's a problem, but we all agree that it's right to have a tutoring budget. Tutoring budget should exist. The question is, how do you deliver it well? And I think it takes a number of years of investment, of iterating, of figuring out what works, what doesn't, widening the pool of people who can be involved, sharing best practice, working together. And some of that has it was fantastic last year, and some of that has been a bit more difficult this year. Johnny laughing in the background. And I think the real worry I have is whether we end this year with, I guess, the government focusing on absolute numbers of students rather than the direction that we're heading in and the progress we're making, and sort of bringing all the stakeholders, giving them a voice and making it incrementally better. Because this should be a long-term permanent solution, not like a couple of years because the pandemic has hit. This is not a sticky plaster. So yeah, I've kind of gone around the question a little bit.
Can I jump in here? Would you mind? I'm sorry. With my school leader hat on, we don't get a chance to embed. Somebody comes along and has a new idea, and then everything has to flip again. So schools and teachers are really suspicious of new ideas, which is why the take-up was, challenging last year. And now we're looking at outcomes and we're looking at numbers. If schools don't get a chance to get used to it, and if the people who schools listen to don't advocate for tutoring, we won't have a chance to build that legacy in schools. So I think it's really true what you said, Andrew, that we have to lean into providing good PR. And we have to model a close alignment between what schools need and what we can provide as tutors, because there's a huge cognitive dissonance and teachers are basically knackered. Specifically right now, and it's one of those things where I think the teachers were so overwhelmed with moving to online, and the school leaders were so overwhelmed with overwhelmed teachers. Well-being was at the core of everything over the last few years, and helping a new army of people coming in to help is not something that it's easy to find capacity for, headspace for in a school. And the more that we can do to make our systems as, with as high user experience as possible, the more able we'll be to sort of slip through that friction. Does that make sense?
Rich, do you have anything to add? Or?
Probably not. I threw a lot of the grenades into NTP.
I'll elaborate on that perhaps a little bit. So
probably the most of anyone in this room.
Your quotes, Rich, I don't know, but back in June in the FT, it's falling short. More recently, in the last 4 days, it's at risk of catastrophic failure. And I don't think any of that is a reflection of the services that have been provided in terms of the tuition. I know there's been discussions around the cost, particularly with some of the teaching organisations that have come into the fray, and obviously the use of tutors from foreign countries. But it shouldn't distract from the service, the overall service that I think has been provided. But I think maybe sort of going on from I think some of the discussion that Jane sort of pushed us towards was how could it have been delivered better? What lessons could we learn if the government were to wake up suddenly and decide that we're going to put more money into this? But I think more importantly, what is the future of the NTP? Because I think Julia touched on is that we work in these kind of ridiculous political cycles. Education is this ball that keeps getting thrown around. Fortunately, unfortunately, whichever way the divide you sit on, we've had a Tory government for far too long. Not long enough, whichever way you sit. I think I'm battling both sides there. But they will be out of government. The NTP will finish. What happens next? What can we do to try and do that?
Can I? Was it Richards?
Yeah, go for it.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm quite happy to say what they can improve. That's a good way of putting it. Excellent questioning. No, I fully support. Yeah, how old you got? No, I fully support the NTP as much as anybody else. I really love when Boris Johnson comes out and says tutoring is at the forefront of Operation Catch Up. What he was imagining was great. What he got, I agree. It has to survive, and we have to be putting positive PR, and we have to be getting it to be reformed. The institutions who are in charge of overrunning it, we're in an echo chamber. John will laugh. I said that word about 80 times to them. They only listen to 5 people, thank goodness. One of them is sitting to my right, who I have full support on the NTP, and in many closed rooms have made that very clear. But if you look at the original 32 providers, only 6 of them were tutoring companies. Only 8 of them, including the Very Good Action Tutoring and the Tutor Trust, had experience of tutoring. It was not the national tutoring program. It was, and we were sitting in rooms. I remember a government minister saying, "Oh, I might as well pick. I can do this." And we were viewed as an industry as babysitters and cleaners. And I meant to say no disrespect to babysitters and cleaners, but they're not tutors. I do believe it's a profession. And the belief was that any old kid can turn up and start tutoring. And no, the teachers aren't on board with that. I'm sure that the ones in the fantastic schools we're working with are, but I speak to teachers, and I don't think I have any particular segment of those pre or post interview, but they're all against it. They all don't want it. They want to have the money and have a voucher system because they don't believe that having people with a week or two of training is enough to deliver the education outcomes. And I think if those 32 providers had all provided tutoring, and I fought, and I'm going red because I fought off this, fine, have the condition that you have to have worked with a school to be on the NTP, but for all the very reasons that James has said, and he's extremely experienced, and Johnny I know would back that up. But it should have been in condition that you have to have provided tutoring to do the NTP. And so I don't know who's delivering these sessions, but I suspect 90% of them haven't ever done any tutoring. And I'm very worried. And the reason why I'm being vocal is if we just sit as a profession and say, oh yeah, it's great, we support it, and don't put the pressure to actually reform it, it's going to die anyway, because the schools are saying, who are these random kids who are teaching my kids without very much training of qualifications? So I think it's really important. I wish we had have got that one condition in that you had to provide tutoring so that I knew that every single one of those 250,000 hours was provided by someone who has been a tutor. And when we go to the DTA, when we go to the events and you say, put your hand up if you actually did any tutoring NDP, one or two people, anyone else? Right, in a room full of tutors, none of us did it. So my point's made, it wasn't the tutor providing it. And that's the reform we need to make. And I agree, the best way to do it is to reform it and talk to the people who are doing it. I'm not convinced of the current provider either. I think they have their own agenda, and I just think it's become politicized, and that's really sad. The reason we went so hard at the beginning was the beginning is the chance to set the trajectory correctly. I think the trajectory wasn't set correctly. I think it's shocking that Tutor Fair aren't in there. It was an obvious contender for a professional tutoring company that has a charitable wing and others. I think it would have been better if we got more. So what can we do? I think there needs to be a more rigorous training. I think we need more tutoring companies involved. And what I don't know how to do, and I'd ask to the panel of experts, is how do we get the teachers whose trust we've lost back on board, telling their schools that tutoring is a good idea from where we are now?
So I think Rich hit on quite a lot of those points. Is there anything the panel wants to add to that?
It's a really, really hard problem to solve. Like it goes back to the point I made earlier about this constant kind of search for high quality and scalable. And we just, the first thing we have to all look around and acknowledge is that there are trade-offs. The most high quality is not scalable. The most scalable is not high quality. And so you have to find this balancing act where you're incrementally improving kind of the scalable option and not bypassing the really high quality option in the process. So you need to find ways for everyone to get involved, because ultimately if you rule out any component of if you rule out charities or you rule out qualified teachers or near peer or agencies, you're not going to be successful. So it's about sort of figuring out the kind of central baseline quality threshold that we need. Because I'll give you an example. Like my tutor, we have, let's say, around 100,000 tutor applications a year. Obviously, many of them are not fit to tutor, and we weed out as many as possible in the interview. We then go through an initial training, and our goal is to support as many students as possible. And so that initial training needs to be a balance of something that doesn't cause everyone to say, I don't want to try tutoring, but is enough where they've got a baseline where they're not going to fail the student. And again, there are trade-offs. They come in, they need experience, they're better after their 100th lesson than they are after their first. That's definitely true. We get it wrong sometimes. We have to quality assure, we weed people out. So we're not getting it right 100% of the time by any stretch, but we need to build from the ground up. Otherwise, it won't be scalable. Because I think the challenge is if you have 1,000 companies offering a couple of hundred students, then it's even more difficult to get kind of standardization, consistency of quality. So I'm not sort of I agree with your points fundamentally. It's been too rigid for schools. They don't like it because they're being dictated to about how to use tutoring. They know their students. They feel like they know their students. And so if they're told has to be 15 weeks, has to be one subject per student, has to be 65% pupil premium, have to use this platform, they just say it's too much. Like I'm better off just figuring it out myself. And that's a shame because this is a budget that is the world's first tutoring budget from a government. It's incredible. Holland have followed suit, Australia have followed suit, Texas have just adopted tutoring statewide. The Education Endowment Foundation consulted with the Biden administration about how they can kind of do a national tutoring program. It's incredible. It's world leading, but it is failing to some extent. There's providers that should be on it or should be supported to get on it that aren't. There's not enough camaraderie between the people running it and the tutoring providers. A lot of the tutoring providers weren't even consulted when this magical platform emerged that is designed to replace all tutoring agencies. So, I mean, there are so many problems that need solving, but the approach I've tried to take is not, and I think there needs to be all sorts of options, but I haven't spoken to the press. I've rejected every time I'm called because I want to work with the body running it to try and find solutions, because I'm worried that if I don't do that, then the NTP will just fail. And not just because of me, because of all the tutoring partners and all the stakeholders.
One of the amazing things that happened at the beginning of the NTP was that tutor training was a requirement. That was a line in the sand. And I think that was a really exciting moment for us, and one that we can really lean in on. I think that recruitment, the process that the Manus tutors go through in terms of recruitment, means that I know exactly who I'm getting. They're a very cohesive bunch, and I know what their next steps are. And then the last thing is retention. Like James said, a tutor's 100th hour will be a lot better than their first hour. And there's plenty of evidence in teaching to show what that process of improvement is, and then where the plateaus are as well, which is also really interesting. But if we can create a body of a culture around making sure that the legacy of the NTP is more closely aligned with how schools work with teaching assistants, and less closely aligned with how schools work with interactive whiteboards. Interactive whiteboards have zero educational value in the classroom, no proven value whatsoever, and a lot of money was thrown at them. And some classrooms have a high one and a low one so that everybody can reach them, which is adorable and irrelevant, because if you put another human being in the classroom, you halve the ratios. Yeah? So if we can understand, and actually Stephen Fraser from the EF said this to me last year, if we can understand how tutors should become a new instrument in the orchestra of school, then we have a legacy. And then the pupil premium funding has made use of it because schools won't want to do without it. But unfortunately, lots and lots of schools use their teaching assistants to do photocopying because they've not trained them. And because the teachers who are deploying the teaching assistants never signed up to manage adults. So there's a whole language around what the role of the tutor is and how the school can learn to work with them that needs to be developed in a really proactive way by the professionals in this room and the professionals in the schools who understand what that looks like. And unless that language happens, it's another initiative.
I just want to, sorry, Rich, just before you come back in, I'm mindful of time. I want to give the audience the opportunity to ask some questions. So, Rich, Jacob, Andrew, if you've just got some final points just to make on that. 10 seconds. The National Tutoring Programme nearly wasn't online. It just shows how much ignorance there was in the government. My point to the most heated I've ever been, I think it was in that meeting ever, was you're about to make your national lockdown recovering programme be locked down, to which they said there won't be another lockdown. My point is, when some of us had the year, some of us had to play the bad cop to the good cop. And there was some coordination. We were, through the TTA task force, trying to do that. And it's so important that there are different voices being correctly delivering and calming it. You can't quite put your head above the parapet. But some of us do have to do that, because if it hadn't have been online, there would have been no provision between December and February of last year. I'm no longer involved in NTP in any way, or in consulting in it. Those who are involved, I think, need to work out what are the 2 or 3 things that are
potentially now catastrophic towards it, and allow some of us to put our heads back above the parapet. I agreed, not publicly in the press, and I certainly haven't ever put the NTP down in terms of numbers. Mine's always been the organisation operations. We've got to make sure it is the best it can be. So yeah, we have to continue working together in the industry, and I agree there's less camaraderie, there's more people kind of pulling away and doing their own thing, and I really worry the NTP won't make it beyond another year. I think the 5 or 6 tutoring companies do need to get that camaraderie back, do need to talk, do need to go through voices like TTA, and we need to be saying, yes, it's fantastic, we fully support it, and here's what we can do. I think it's a difficult position right now, but I hope it does survive because it's a fantastic initiative, and I want the government to continue combating the stigma of private tutoring.
And Jacob, when it collapses in a year's time, are you ready to pick up the strain? Yeah.
That's what I was just, without being too pessimistic, and I think, it's a great scheme if it works, it'd be brilliant for it to continue. It wouldn't surprise me if the government turns around and throws another 500 million at it and keeps it running for a little bit longer with, the higher kind of their contribution being higher. Will it last forever? I'm not sure. And I think the main concern for me is what happens next. There's a lot of organisations and charities that have expanded their provision to underprivileged students because of the NTP. What happens to those students once the schools stop being willing to pay that money to the organisations and the charities? Where do those pupils then go? I think we should have one eye on the NTP and improving it because it's fantastic and it's making a big impact now. I think we also need to have one eye on what happens to those pupils when the NTP does, if it is going to, start to disappear.
If I can have 2 things, I'll be really quick because I know I'm staying for it. But one thing is what's going to happen at the end of the NTP. So I think the vision that we should have should be like the solar power industry. It's like the government has started out with big subsidies and then they've fizzled it out over time. And so we've got to think about, well, what does it look like as the subsidy level reduces? How do we provide something which is scalable and good quality? I mean, that's the model that we have to have, and then the industry will be back on its feet, trading without the subsidy at the end of it, and that'll be a good thing, and it'll be part of the instruments of the orchestra for the school in a new way. But the other thing I wanted to say was, what a fantastic conversation. We've gone far beyond access. We've gone into the whole philosophy of, well, what is a tutor? How does it fit together with everybody else? And what a great group. Sorry, I'm very keen to hear on everyone else as well, so I'll shut up. But brilliant to have it with the head of the TTA, with heads of companies, and really interesting conversation.
Yeah, and I'm sure we could probably continue for another hour, I think, at least.
Stay.
I think I'll take that over one card. Fortunately, mine works tangentially anyway, so managed to hopefully keep there. But any questions?
Yeah, great. So my question is, there seems to be, perhaps unsurprisingly, agreement here that an increase in the ubiquity of tutoring is a net good for students. Now, we've seen in the case of China, increasingly so with South Korea and Japan, there is pushback against tutoring, owing to the increases in the cost of living, mental health pressure. We seem to have hit peak tutoring in this market. When do we know if we've hit peak tutoring in the UK? And do you think the industry itself is capable of self-regulation in order to prevent that from happening?
I don't mind giving it a crack.
Yeah.
It's quite remarkable what's going on, particularly in China at the moment, and we've seen the world's largest tutoring app overnight. VIP Kid, for example, who the legislation was probably about, had 100,000 US teachers on their books, and now they're displaced. So all these professional tutors and teachers are no longer able to work. They're no longer able to earn a living, and they've got a huge kind of amount that they can offer. In terms of have we reached peak tutoring, I think my experience of working with teachers and head teachers in state schools is there's unanimous support for the concept of tutoring. Everyone agrees that it's robustly evidenced, it's a really great way, like personalized one-to-one or small group help is impactful. And I think where the kind of controversy or debates sort of happens is around cost, the operations of it, how easy it is to run. I think what type of tutor, is it online, offline? I think that it's like within tutoring where a lot of the disagreements start, rather than what went on in China around, I think this idea that there's too much pressure, there's too many high stakes exams, and you win or you lose by this moment that you lead up to through tutoring. I think you get some of that in the UK with GCSEs and A-levels, and I'm sure there will be an evolving assessment picture, which will in some ways change tutoring, because we saw the cancellation of exams impacted our consumer business in certain ways, negatively initially, and then once people figured out that you actually do need to continue learning even if you don't have exams, it picked up again, and we had longer kind of cycles with our students. So I think the picture will change. I think behavioural patterns for tutoring will change, but the underlying point that tutoring is high impact, as Ben said at the beginning, has existed for thousands of years, and I think it will continue to be a great way of supporting students. To me, every student should have a tutor, regardless of whether they're high performing, underperforming, nervous, confident, misbehaving. Like every student can benefit from the right tutor. The question is, how do you get it at scale for everyone in a high quality way?
I completely agree. I think having a tutor is like having a personal trainer, right? It can't really do any damage there, and there's definitely different goals as to whether you're underperforming or overperforming. I certainly hope not. And yes, what happened in China is terrifying. Just in case anyone's not aware, they basically banned tutoring or private one-to-one tutoring in the way that we know it for their main exam, be akin to banning A-level tutoring. Absolutely shocking. I think the UK was heading in that direction when I first joined about 10 years ago. Tutoring and the West End tutoring companies did not do a great job of this with the PR, and they just thought it was all about yachts and super yachts. Someone on this panel's business partner particularly. And that was good to show that tutoring is exciting, got people in there. But the TTA came along actually and said to us, stop doing that, because we were doing it too. And it's really important that we do have hearts and minds there. So with the initiatives of many companies, my tutor, particularly Tutor Nation and the charities, the NTP, we are making tutoring more available. I think that's so important, that it's not just, tutoring is right on the cusp of being a beating stick against the Tories and being highly, highly, highly politicized. And whatever you think of the Tories and whether they deserve it or not, it's not good for us to be in that space. So it's really important that the PR efforts, and we're trying as an industry to do more PR. I think we had the best opportunity now. Training is becoming key in tutoring. We're getting national presence and the highest people in the land talking about it. A great question, which I didn't answer. I apologize. What do we do next? We have to continue using this platform exactly as we are, communicating, doing these events and sharing ideas, inspiring each other in order to make sure that all tutors are serving the whole market. So for me, the way in which we avoid that is that tutors go in the direction of lawyers. You've got the tutors who we're bringing in who are university students, need to, I think, have a promotion so they can see it as a 10, 20-year career plan where they move into other organizations, maybe plug for myself there and earn 50, 100 pounds an hour. But then we've got a really important duty to say, but we encourage, inspire, implore you to be putting 5 to 10% of your time back into pro bono initiatives and put it back into the cycle. And I think if we were doing that for the next 5, 10 years, we would have career tutors, we would have the best going into the system, inspiring those who are the newer tutors, and everyone would benefit from that. So I think we are in the right direction to not get tutoring banned, and I encourage everybody to keep pushing towards that. And I will keep telling those of us who aren't doing as many charity initiatives as the amazing people on this panel to support those. And we've already said, let's send our tutors over these initiatives.
Just going to say, if anyone wants to send 5 to 10% of their tutors over to pro bono stuff, jacob@tutorthenation.org. We'd love to have them.
Let's
really love to have them.
Volunteer with us too.
Sorry, just maybe one last question as well.
Thank you so much, by the way. It's very fascinating and thoughtful. I'm just wondering, what do you think is the difference between a £100 an hour tutor and a £20 an hour tutor? In your words.
Branding. Branding, Julia?
No, I sat right back on this one. No.
I would say somebody who's qualified in that sense. Jacob, Andrew, any?
I mean, for me, the difference is irrelevant because the young people I work with, their parents couldn't afford either. So I think, 20, 100, I'm sure there is a difference that we can discuss, but yeah, well, maybe I'm not the most, qualified person to talk about that side of things, but.
I've seen £100 an hour tutors not be so great. I've seen £20 an hour tutors be absolutely life-changing for a student. I think the price that you charge, there can be something underneath it. You get incredible £100 an hour tutors who are inspirational and so well qualified. But I think that society, well, tutoring has, or the tutoring market, parents have a knack of overpaying for what they need. So if you have your 20-year experienced teacher, PhD at Oxbridge, are they going to be the best tutor for the student who wants to get a 4 in their GCSE maths? Probably not. You're probably paying an extra £100 an hour, like for all the kind of excess qualifications that they have. Will a tutor be inspired? Will a student be inspired by someone who is the first person they've ever spoken to who's been to university and is studying that course that they think that they might want to do, but they have no idea what it is? We've seen amazing relationships built out of just building aspiration and raising awareness of like something. We have a lot of schools who don't even have a sixth form, so students might have never seen someone even apply to university.
So there's a lot of perception. There is a lot of perception. As a mum, if I'm going to employ a £75 tutor as opposed to a £40 tutor, not at either extreme actually, it will be because I believe that there is a specialism that will allow this tutor to make more headway with my child more quickly, and that the acceleration of headway will boost confidence and outcomes for my child. And that's why I would put the extra money in. The reason why I sat back just there was that you were signaling a huge disparity between the £20 and £100. That is part of what's concerning, or historically has been concerning.
Yeah, I think the market is signaling that. I don't have that.
Okay. The reason why I spoke earlier about barriers to entry and lowering barriers to entry and improving access to training is that supply should be increased and demand should be increased so that there is a more balanced understanding of what a professional tutor is, a career tutor, of what a near peer is, of what pro bono is. And that idea of creating a sort of long-term professionalism with a more balanced understanding of what you're getting for the extra money would be something that we need to move towards. But the reason why we all sat right back just then was because it's not been developed yet.
My final point, and I will shut up. When I joined as a 21, this is very personal to me, that I wanted to help change the industry, and I hope I've done that in some ways. There were 4 key challenges that I felt as a 20-year-old were preventing me from being a career tutor in the way that all my friends, of course, from LSE went to be doctors, lawyers and bankers, no doctors at LSE. In order, we've gone from smashing it to doing nothing on it. Number 1, I was traveling with eating my lunch on my lap around the tube, and it was miserable. We have smashed online tutoring, and a huge congratulations to the entire industry. If you look at how the tutoring industry reacted to how the school sector reacted, yes, it was easier for us, but we smashed out the park. The entire industry moved online overnight with all the support, all the network, all the tech. That innovation and that terrible profit had been invested in innovation, which is really important. So we smashed that one. Number 2, could you get enough hours? Tutoring was primarily between the hours of 5 and 7 and very unsocial. I think university tutoring, NTP, school level, institutional tutoring, we've done a really, really good job of that as well. You can actually now tutor basically 24/7, and particularly international time differences too. Where have you done a bit less well? Well, that career of tutor, which I'm talking about, and I've laid out a framework in which I think we should be supporting those getting graduates in, but we should also be trying to show those graduates that you can continue going up the £100 an hour, and you can basically have the same earnings as a lawyer and banker. We have 10 in our network who earn over 100 grand a year. It can be done, and those stories are important to inspire people to stick with it. It's not just a bit-time job. But your question is right on the money, and I do say branding only part in jest. We don't know. We don't know. There are many £100 an hour tutors masquerading who are terrible. There are many £20 an hour student tutors who are fantastic and should be on £100 an hour, quite frankly. Nobody is successfully tracking the success and being able to quantify the difference between those. Watch this space. I'll talk about it in a few more months. But that is the next challenge, I think, for our industry.
That's a perfect place for me to pick up, because obviously that's exactly what I do, is I track their thing. So we collect every piece of data on how everyone interacts on the sites and how well and how fast they answer, and we read that, and we are trying to work out what the difference is. And the answer is we don't know yet, but there is something. And how do I know there's something? Because some of these people at £100 an hour, even more, some of them, consistently create fantastic engagements with their students and with their clients, and their clients are really, really happy with them at a high price, and they make a transformational difference. If I just tell you one story to make you believe that a tutor could be worth £200 an hour, it would be that Ed did a reference on Mark, who you've criticised for his £1,000 an hour thing. No, I love it. He's a wonderful guy. Is he worth the money? I don't know. There's an element of you don't quite know what you're buying. But he did a reference for him on a client who was sitting in a private jet waiting for the hurricane to abate. This will put it away a bit. And she just said, look, Mark organised my children's mind for success. And she explained 4 children all had really different learning problems. They sat down with Mark. They were getting disengaged from school. They were being pissed off by the force feeding that they were getting from the system. And Mark organised them so they could receive that, and that they had the prior knowledge that was required, and they were motivated to receive the gift of education, which is given to many and not received by all. And that you can understand that it was worth the kid's future for that mum, and that's priceless. That is a priceless thing. Are they all worth it? I'm not sure. Some of them are just spiffing it. We have a special part of our algorithm to try and pick out people who we think are spiffing it and penalise them. And then we have some of our meetings with our top tutors who constantly try and understand what it's doing to do that. And just one other thing I'd like to say is that I really endorse what James said, is that lots of the young ones are fantastic. Like the right connection with the right person. It's about kids getting what we're trying to get them to, and what are the key concepts.
I think just you need bread and butter, and you need jam. You need both things, and you need the inexpensive tutors because learning takes time, and somebody needs to spend all that time with them. And then sometimes you need a specialist or that extra boost.
Excellent. Well, listen, hopefully we can continue this discussion at the tables as well. So there's a whole bunch of questions I'm sure you guys had. We didn't even touch on technology when we talked about accessibility and how that can help improve the industry as well. But on behalf of everybody here, I'd just like to thank the panel for their time.